All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, yesterday, I covered in detail how the GOP and the President Trump have basically done everything they possibly can since coronavirus began to be on the wrong side of public opinion. From the lockdown debates to reopening schools, the Republican Party has basically staked out a position that puts them on the side of trying to force people back to work or back to school in service of the stock market and nominal GDP, while doing none of the work necessary to actually mitigate the virus itself, which is putting immense limits on all of our lives and the economy. Well, the American public has taken notice. The results are not pretty. Now, Gallup polling shows that the Republican Party has gone from being preferred by 2 points in the general population over Democrats in February 2020 to now being down 11 points. That is a 13-point swing amongst the general population as to party identification over a period of just 4 months. And so just to put that in perspective, the last time we saw numbers like this were before the Democratic tidal wave in the midterm elections, and before that, during the tail end of George W. Bush's presidency. So it pretty much demonstrates an important rebuttal to the spin that we often hear from the Trump campaign and from Trump himself, that his approval rating amongst Republicans is at a record high. Well, that might be true, but as Lucy Caldwell points out, the pool of people who are even left identifying as Republicans is shrinking so rapidly, it means only the real diehards are the ones who are left over to be sampled. It takes special skill to blow a lead like this, given who your opponents are. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, a bunch of septuagenarian corporate neoliberals who screwed up impeachment so badly they had actually a decent segment of the country aligned with the Republican Party before the pandemic hit. But the results show again a point I emphasized yesterday. Something has gone terribly wrong. And almost all of it, in my view, has to do with the free market fundamentalist poison within the Republican Party. The position of the party from the beginning has been, we must end lockdowns to get people back to work. We must reopen schools to get people back to work, all in the service of not having to do any more public relief. And at the same time, they're against public economic relief. They've allowed the virus to absolutely rage out of control across the country, undermining faith in government, travel, business, all the other tools that we actually have to getting to the economy back on track. This was perfectly on display at the White House press briefing just yesterday. Listen to this.
Yeah, the president has said unmistakably that he wants schools to open, and I was just in the Oval talking to him about that. And when he says open, he means open and full, kids being able to attend each and every day at their school. The science should not stand in the way of this.
And unfortunately, that's not even the worst video to come out of the White House yesterday, which put out an advertisement of sorts featuring Larry Kudlow, of all people. I have no words to describe this. Just listen to it.
You see this crane, folks? President Trump's deregulation policies have liberated it, unlocked it, creating jobs, roads, highways, better automobiles, hospitals, equipment, you name it. For every new regulation under President Trump, 8 were abolished, 25,000 Federal Register pages. For ordinary folks, people making less than $45,000 a year, actually people at the bottom of the income ladder making $25,000, they were the biggest beneficiary of deregulations. 15% reduction in costs, fossil fuels, fracking, cheap electricity, cheap natural gas. All that increases wages and take-home pay and makes family life easier and helps small businesses. This is a crane. It builds. President Trump is a builder of the economy. Not even the pandemic is going to stop this.
What offends me most about that video is the title, because it's a perfect distillation of what happened. People in D.C. know that blue-collar workers put Trump in the White House, so they just put the phrase blue-collar worker and combine it with the same traditional GOP line about deregulation. And look, some deregulation is fantastic, but that's not exactly what Donald Trump ran on in 2016. It was supposed to be deregulation so we could build great things in America again. Look around. Do you see any of that? Of course not, because the Republican Party was too worried it would cost too much money. even in the middle of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. You can never escape these people. They have the same lines, the same tricks. They, along with Trump, for listening to them, are single-handedly responsible for one of the biggest domestic boondoggles in American history. They have doomed the electoral prospects of their party in service of an ideology created and nurtured for the sole purpose of preserving the corporate status quo in America today. I mean, how incredible is that video? The blue collar. It's like, what are you talking about? Once again, and then the best part is,
I watched it like 5 times yesterday.
I know, I sent it along. I was like, I could not believe this. And you're watching this, and then again, like I showed, who are the people who don't want to put that crane to use? The Republican Party. It's McConnell, Lamar Alexander. These are the people who are like, oh, can't spend all this money. Oh, it's like, you think deregulation alone is just going to pump this crane out in the middle of a worst economic crisis since the Great Depression?
I really want to be a fly on the wall in that pitch meeting. We were like, we got the perfect guy for our blue collar message. Yeah, right. It's Larry Kudlow. He's going to tie together the blue collar worker message and the deregulation message, and we'll stand him next to a crane. Oh my God.
He looks like a dandy. That's the word for it. He looks like a dandy.
Incredible. And okay, so I've been thinking about this, and part of why, as you covered yesterday and we've been talking about on the show, why they have become so on the wrong side of public opinion on all these like 2/3, 1/3 issue is because in 2016, what Trump was able to do rhetorically, which I think he's been a complete fraud in office, but rhetorically he was able to tie together the traditional like small business, which tends to be very libertarian, anti-regulation, like low taxes. They love this stuff, right? That core small business group, which was like the core of the Tea Party, the core of the anti-lockdown protesters, like that was the thing, right? They were able to tie that together with wage earners. The wage earners are not with them on this stuff, on this whole direction of let's just reopen the economy and shove you all back onto the front lines with no hazard pay and no help, or let's have a shutdown and also give you no help so that you're losing your homes and you're fearful about the future and you're fearful about your literal lives. And so what they have done is now they are just focusing on that like small business owner, libertarian sort of, small coalition part of the party, and they've lost everybody else. That's really what's going on here.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. That's how you get it. That's like I said, because the Trump campaign and the Trump White House are always like, well, look at his approval amongst Republicans. There ain't that many Republicans left in the country now, folks.
That was so interesting.
That's the worst part in a 13-point swing. And like I said, they were up by 2 in February 2020. I think we even covered it here on the show, which is impeachment was such a disaster. And Biden and the party at that time looked like such disarray. And they had no idea what they stood for. It was just like pure corporatism, undistilled. That America was like, all right, I'm with the Republicans now. And then the pandemic hit. And every single month, party identification drops, and then in June, when I think he truly lost the country, was on the full-blown lockdown and the spike of cases in June, and they just said, you know what, screw it.
So
I'm not with you anymore.
I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is the handling of the protests. Being so
that's right.
heavy-handed on that, because look.
See, this is where I disagree. I don't think it was anything to do with the heavy hand. I think it was just letting chaos reign American streets. Whenever he's like, because this is what he kept saying. He would be like, it's a democratic city, let them figure it out. And it's like, you are the president of the whole country. And when people feel like things are unmoored, they're just not going to be with you.
Sure, but he didn't do anything right. He didn't give people a sense of safety and security. That's true. I mean, I disagreed with the approach that he took, and you and I obviously had some spirited debates here about that. But also, his rhetoric was so divisive. And so you had an overwhelming majority of the country. Like at the beginning, especially, it was like 70, 80% who were like, yes to these protests. And yes, there was an injustice done here. And yes, we want to have a national conversation about it. And yes, we support the people on the streets. And he put himself on the wrong side of that. Now, there's all kinds of types of racism and bigotry endemic to this country. But most white people, even the ones who may have some problematic views, they don't want to feel like they are associated with something that is sort of blatantly racist. And so I think part of also all of this is we saw his numbers on the handling of the pandemic were a disaster. His numbers on the handling of the protests were a disaster too. And I think that is an important part of the story of like, we can't get behind any aspect of this. We can't get behind the rhetoric. We can't get behind the divisiveness, especially not during this time. We can't get behind the lack of governing. We can't get behind any of this and the lack of response. And so I think those things all tie together in that party identification. As you point out, like the fact that your opponent is Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, and you're losing this badly, and you're losing the battle over like even what party people affiliate with is pretty devastating.
There were two things that he all he had to do was project competence. You don't even have to be competent. You can project competence, like Andrew Cuomo.
Right.
And then you could do what Greg Abbott did. I talked about it at the time. He had the Floyd family in, they were on their knees and they prayed together.
Yeah, it was respectful.
You don't have to endorse pulling down statues and anti-racism literature and all this other crap that we're seeing across the country. Easy. That was it. He had a very high approval rating in the state for how he handled the crisis. That's all he had to do.
Yeah.
And he screwed up on both counts. And here we are, right? Now, record lows and looking like a dramatic electoral disaster.
Of the type that I did not honestly think we were going to see again in a long time because of a divided nation.
There you go.
That's what we're on track for.
I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.